3 spine-chilling true horror stories revealed haunted encounters that shocked 99 lives. EP 171. The wind howled, shadows danced under the flickering street lamps, and in the heart of Ohio, a sinister presence was lurking just next door. Sarah, a weary single mother, barely managed to keep her head above water, working 2 exhausting jobs to provide for her ambitious teenage son, Jake. Their quiet suburban life was punctuated by the familiar clinking of dishes in the diner where she served meals, but everything changed when a new family moved in next door. Their picture-perfect smiles and uncanny charm masked an unsettling air that prickled at Sarah's instincts. Days turned into restless nights, and subtle, strange sounds began to slice through the fabric of her peace. Jake mentioned strange noises were coming from the new neighbor's basement, scratching, muffled thuds that sent chills down her spine. "I'm going over there for coffee," she told him one day, trying to ease her worries. But even as she walked over, her heart raced with an unshakable sense of dread. Something was off, and time was ticking like the slow ticking of a clock counting down to an unknown horror. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That night, after another grueling shift, the streets seemed more sinister than ever. The glow of streetlights felt like the last flickers of hope before darkness consumed everything. Sarah wrestled with a growing unease, convinced those neighbors were hiding something terrible. As she returned home, her breath quickened, every creak from the house set her heart racing while the shadows cast by the wind danced with malicious intent. Just when she thought she could find solace, Jake vanished, leaving only an errand to the corner store behind. Panicked, she rushed through the neighborhood, her thoughts spiraling into a web of fearful imagination. The streets, once so familiar, morphed into a labyrinth of dread as she desperately sought her son. Frustration turned into despair. Each voice she called out echoed like a ghost haunting her. It was in that moment Sarah noticed whispers against the wind, disquieting murmurs about children who had gone missing over the years, children who had been last seen near that mysterious family next door. When she approached the police, her heart sank. Each dismissal felt like a dagger, every indifferent nod a tightening noose. Neighborhood faces shifted, friendly smiles gave way to sharp glares, denouncing her fears with silent judgment. The tension rose, the air thick with paranoia. When finally facing the neighbors, a deceptive calm cloaked their sugary smiles that made Sarah's blood run cold. Their walls could hold secrets darker than death, and the feeling of being watched closed in around her, tightening its grip like a spider's web. Just as she turned to leave, a flash of movement caught her eye. A flicker of shadow from the basement window extinguished her flickering hope. A cold dread settled deep in her bones. She stood at the threshold of uncovering something dreadful, something that would snatch her son away forever. Each moment passed like an eternity as the faint echoes of childhood laughter turned sinister around her. Sarah was spiraling into darkness, her determination clashing with terror as she prepared to confront what lay beneath those eerie smiles. But what if she found nothing but her own fears instead? More than the nightmares that awaited in the shadows, what if she herself became part of the stories whispered among neighbors, just another face lost to the night? The night was suffocating, thick with dread and uncertainty. Sarah stood frozen, her breath hitching in her throat as she watched the ominous flicker dance behind the basement window. Her instincts screamed at her to flee, but a more profound feeling held her in place, a chilling sense of duty. She had to find Jake. With shaking hands, she clenched the key to her resolve and bolted toward the neighbor's front door. She knocked hard, the sound reverberated through the silence. Each thunderous tap echoed like a warning. The world around her darkened, the shadows seeming to inch closer, as if they were whispering secrets meant only for her. The door swung open. There they stood, the flawless family. Flawless smiles that warped into an unsettling grin. "Sarah, how lovely to see you." Their voices dripped with syrupy sweetness. "Come in, one tu?" "No," she breathed, backing away instinctively. "I want to know what is going on in your basement." "Why, nothing at all," Mrs. Jones replied, tilting her head, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "Just a few repairs." A shiver crawled up Sarah's spine. "I want to see. Now." The smile faded for just a fraction of a second, the clarity of their facade slipping as the air thickened with palpable tension. Then, like a marionette answering its string, Mrs. Jones nodded. "All right, but you must promise to keep it quiet." The basement door creaked open, and an acrid scent wafted up, a metallic tang that choked her on contact. The stairs spiraled down, swallowed by darkness, a gaping maw beckoning her forward. Hesitation clawed at her chest, but the thought of Jake drove her on. With one last faltering breath, she descended, her heart thudded violently against her ribs. The air grew colder the lower she went, and the scratching noises Jake spoke of intensified, now transformed into frantic scrapes echoing through the hollow space, resonating dread in her gut. What lay beyond the offset door at the bottom? She reached the last step, her fingers trembling against the railing. The echoing sound grew louder, reverberating like a beast awaiting her descent. Sarah pushed against the door, the wood groaning in reluctant protest before it swung open. What she saw sent icy needles racing through her veins. It was chaos, a room cloaked in darkness but filled with grotesque reflections of childlike joy turned nightmarish. Scattered toys lay in disarray, drawings tacked to the wall depicting dark figures that loomed over crying children. But that wasn't what shattered her heart. It was the sight of a small child, no older than 8, tugging at the hem of her shirt, eyes wide with fear and pleading for escape. "Help me please," the child whimpered, and Sarah fought the urge to scream. Before she could respond, a cacophony erupted from the shadows, deep, guttural voices clawing at her sanity. "You shouldn't have come here, Sarah," they hissed, encircling her, their presence suffocating. She stumbled back, panic rising as chilling fingers grazed her. The urgency to escape surged, making her feet turn and propel her back up the stairs 2 at a time. She burst out into the cool night air, heart racing as she fell into the grass, gasping for breath, the world spinning around her. Desperate, she fumbled for her phone to call Jake, but he had to be safe. He had to be. What had she just uncovered? An innocent boy lost in that nightmare, or a trap waiting to ensnare even more souls? The reality glared at her, and dread curled tightly in her stomach. As she looked back at the house, illuminated under the moonlight, the Jones family stood at the window, their eyes hollow and their smiles wide. The game was only just beginning, and the question echoed in her mind: was Jake next? Every instinct screamed for her to run, but deep down, she was already ensnared. And out of nowhere, she felt a tug at her heart, a chilling certainty that she may not make it back, but she had to try. The night had grown colder, thicker, the shadows taller. Just as she turned to flee, a distant laughter rang out, a children's giggle that twisted her stomach. It sounded eerily familiar. Her heart sank as she realized the truth: they weren't just after children. They wanted her family too. Before she could move, a hand grabbed her shoulder, ice cold and unyielding, spinning her back around. The sinister smiles had returned. She was not alone anymore. "Silly Sarah," one voice crooned, "the game's just beginning." What fate awaited her next? Her breaths came in ragged gasps, the icy fear wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. She spun to confront the owners of those haunting voices, each one echoing from the confines of her nightmares. The Joneses stood too close, their smiles stretched too wide, expressions masked with that same predatory joy that sent tremors skittering down her spine. "Let me go!" Sarah shouted, her voice cracking. She jerked her shoulder away, but the grip remained, unyielding, as if the hand was part of the shadows themselves. Desperation clawed at her throat. "Now, why would we do that?" Mr. Jones purred, his tone unsettlingly calm. "You've come to play with us, haven't you?" "Play? I don't want to play." She felt a rush of heat as panic flooded her. The listless gaze of the child from the basement flashed through her mind, igniting her determination to break free. Just beyond the Jones family, the door to the basement loomed, a dark reminder of what lurked within. A playroom turned prison. They were hiding something, and if Jake was anywhere near there, he was in grave danger. With all her might, she shoved away from Mr. Jones, breaking free. She turned and ran. Heart pounding, she sprinted toward the streetlight that flickered menacingly in the distance. Each step felt sluggish, as if the very ground beneath her conspired to drag her back into their clutches. "No one escapes," they called after her, a chorus of whispers trailing through the night. The sudden absence of any sounds but her footfalls made it deafening, filling her with dread as she booked it down the pathway. The laughter returned, echoing through the neighborhood, playing tricks on her senses. Was it real or merely a fragment of her terrified mind? She couldn't stop to ponder it. As she neared the street, freedom loomed ahead. The children's giggles morphed into something sinister, edging her heart towards despair. They weren't just playing, they were haunting her, taunting her. She could see the bright lights of her own home just down the block. With renewed adrenaline, she pushed herself harder. But the air around her shifted, thickening into a viscous fog that constricted her lungs. Suddenly, the soft touch of little hands gripped her ankles, jerking her off balance. A ghastly chorus of children emerging from the shadows, screeching, "Stay with us." Sarah stumbled, falling heavily onto the pavement. Pain shot up her side, but she refused to look back, even as the cold touch of small fingers reached out, trying to pull her down into the depths of despair. "Sarah!" A voice broke through. The sound of Jake's urgent calling sent electric shockwaves coursing through her veins. It brought clarity amid the chaos. "Jake!" She screamed, spitting dirt from her mouth as she forced herself to rise. She dragged her feet along the ground, driven by her brother's voice. "Where are you?" But the laughter erupted again, loud and invasive, mocking the hope that flared within her. The shadows thickened, swirling around her feet like a whirlpool, each step feeling more futile than the last. "Come back!" they whimpered, the voices transforming into pitiful cries. "We just want to play." As if in response, the Jones family materialized around her, their faces illuminated by the dim streetlight, gleaming with anticipation. Her pulse quickened as their smiles widened into grotesque masks of promise and dread. "Join us, Sarah," they sang, their voices blending into an eerie melody that enveloped her. Their arms reached out, swaying like puppets on strings, luring her closer, the edges of their bodies blurring into the shadows. Gritting her teeth, Sarah forced her feet to move, darting in a direction away from the house. She stumbled into the street, and then silence. It was so sudden and absolute she staggered, almost losing her footing again. Her senses heightened, she searched the darkness around her, wondering if they would follow. But there was only stillness, an unsettling quiet that filled her with dread and disbelief. "Jake!" She called again, terrified that he would vanish just like the shadows. "Where are you? Please, answer me." Just as her voice faded into the anxious night, a faint cry broke the stillness, a sound so heart-wrenching it sent a shiver racing down her spine. "Help me!" Panic bubbled up anew as she sprinted towards the sound. Each step brought with it a new wave of dread, as she questioned whether Jake was beckoning her into a trap or truly needed her help. And then, through the veil of darkness, she spotted movement, a flicker of a familiar figure hidden among the trees. But as she strained to make it out, doubt seeped in, plunging her into a torrent of uncertainty. Was it really Jake? Or was it yet another trick of the night? The chilling question clawed at her insides, the answer drifting just out of reach as she plunged further into the night's sinister embrace. Sarah's heart raced as she navigated through the trees, branches scraping her arms like ghostly fingers. Shadows danced around her, pulsing to a rhythm only they could hear. The air was electric, filled with the stench of decay, and she struggled to block out the whispers slithering through the darkness. Sarah overheard. The voice was faint, a desperate call rising above the horror pressing in from all sides. She pushed forward, her breath hitching in her throat. With each step closer, her mind wrestled with doubt. The figure remained elusive, flickering in and out of her line of sight like a fading star. "Jake?" She called breathlessly, hoping against hope for a response. Suddenly, a prickle of ice traveled down her spine. A figure loomed in the darkness, unmistakably male, but it wasn't Jake. Mr. Jones grinned, his smile stretching to impossible lengths, his eyes wild with twisted glee. "Looking for someone?" he crooned, stepping out from behind the tree, closing the distance. Before Sarah could process her fear, the hideous laughter erupted around her again, swelling like a haunting symphony. She turned and ran, her legs pumping furiously, adrenaline coursing through her veins like fire. "Where do you think you're going?" The laughter was a chorus, omnipresent, wrapping around her, threatening to pull her under. Branches snapped beneath her feet, and she could hear the thin, eerie giggles of children echoing in a dreadful loop. The laughter transformed into a cacophony of sickening delight, a chorus of voices that seemed to crawl into her ears and squeeze her brain. "Back to play." They sang in unison, their high-pitched voices rising and falling like the tide. The very ground felt alive beneath her, a living thing that both invited her and repelled her. She needed to find Jake. She had to, but what if he wasn't real? What if he was a promise that never existed, a cruel mirage crafted by the very shadows that threatened to consume her? "Help me." The voice was closer now, more distinct and ragged. She ran towards it without thinking, desperation clawing at her insides. "Stay!" echoed the voices. "Play with us." A sudden flash of light caught her eye. She stumbled upon a clearing, its eerie glow beckoning her. In the center sat a twisted, rotting tree that looked like it had seen humanity's darkest days, branches like gnarled fingers reaching out. At its base, a small figure knelt, insignificant, trembling. "Jake!" she gasped, recognition cutting through her fear. But as she neared him, the air grew thick with malice. The child turned, his face sunken, devoid of life. "Sarah." His voice was hollow, laced with despair. "They won. Let me go." The silhouettes of the Joneses materialized around her again, their forms shifting in and out of reality. "Why did you come back?" Mr. Jones whispered, his voice slithering over her skin. "You belong with us now." Sarah's heart hammered wildly in her chest. She could feel the shadows brushing against her, their presence suffocating. "No!" she cried, stepping back. The child's eyes bore an unfathomable weight of sorrow. "You have to listen. They want you to play." His voice trembled, a pitiful echo of fear that resonated deep within her. They wanted to trap her, just as they had trapped him. Would she turn into one of the hollow creatures that haunted these woods? One swift movement brought her face to face with the whispers again. "Join us," they pleaded, voices merging in an overwhelming tide of longing. In that moment, clarity struck. She wouldn't let the darkness win. Adrenaline surged through her veins again, and she turned sharply, ready to run back into the embrace of the shadows. Searching for a way out, she had to find her way home. Just as she took off, the ground quaked beneath her, a monstrous roar erupting from below. "Don't leave!" the voices cried, despairing and furious. "You can't escape." The clearing began to warp, the darkness closing in around her. Panicked, she sprinted for the edge of the trees, knowing that whatever lay behind would never let her go easily. But then, a faint beacon there, beyond the gloom, flickering faintly in the distance. A light. Was it the house? Or a trap set to lure her back? Each step felt like a final gamble, but she couldn't stop now. "Jake!" she screamed, her voice laced with determination. As she raced toward the glow, twisting roots snagged at her feet, dragging her back, threatening to pull her into the depths. And then, just at the brink of freedom, everything went dark again. A suffocating void swallowed her whole. In that darkness, a whisper echoed, sharp and clear. Now you're one of us. A chill spread through her body as the last vestiges of hope slipped away, leaving behind only an unending darkness that seemed to pulse with life. With anguish pounding in her ears, Sarah realized the truth lurking within the terrifying abyss. She was caught in a game she didn't know how to play. What would happen next? Would she find a way out or succumb to the horrors waiting beneath the surface? The question lingered in the darkness, unanswered. Sarah felt pressure within the dark, a tightening grip around her ribs as the void pulsed like a heartbeat. It was suffocating, an all-consuming dread washing over her. She could almost hear the laughter wrapping around her, a mocking lullaby drawing her deeper into despair. Suddenly, a flicker of light pierced through the blackness, sharp against her closed eyelids. When Sarah opened her eyes, she found herself sprawled on the cold, damp ground of the clearing again, heart racing. The decaying tree loomed over her, its gnarled branches swaying in a rhythm that felt cruelly mocking. "Jake!" she shouted, panic flooding her voice. He had to be here. He had to be real. Each word echoed, swallowed by the trees that tightened around her, watching, waiting, but the clearing was empty, only echoes of her own desperation remained. The fear fluttered in her chest, clawing at her mind. Had she dreamt him? Just another cruel trick of the darkness? A gust of wind rustled the leaves, whispers creeping back in. "Join us, play with us." She scrambled to her feet, heart hammered a frantic beat. Was it possible that she had crossed into a realm where time obeyed no rules? Fear pricked at her consciousness as dread slinked back into the corners of her mind. "Why don't you stay?" The cold voice of Mr. Jones shattered her thoughts like glass. He emerged from the shadows, his monstrous grin stretching impossibly wide. The other Joneses floated behind him, ethereal and blurred, their smiles forming an unsettling chorus. "Join the fun, girl," Mr. Jones crooned, tilting his head. "You will never be alone again." Sarah trembled, instinct screaming at her to run, but her legs felt heavy, as if the very earth was rooting her in place. The laughter, that sickening melody, swirled around her, rising and falling. "You can't escape, Sarah," it whispered, each syllable a dagger twisting deep into her heart. "Jake!" she cried again. "Help me. If you're real, show yourself." The shadows churned as they pulled together, forming a veil of darkness just beyond the gnarled roots of the tree. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw him, his terrified eyes staring back at her, pleading and lost. But then it wavered, and the shadows devoured it, morphing into dark seething shapes. "What have you done?" The hollow voice rasped, echoing through her soul. It was Jake, yet infused with the sorrow of the void. "Leave while you can." "Don't!" A sudden roar erupted from the ground, a guttural sound as the earth quaked beneath her feet, the clearing shifting once more. The tree's bark rippled and split, revealing a gaping maw filled with darkness, whispering in her ear. No escape. With a raw scream trembling through her body, she turned and bolted toward the thicket. Branches lashed at her like angry spirits, but she dodged and wove through the chaos. The laughter grew distant, but the urgency bubbling in her chest propelled her forward. Twisting around a trunk, she stumbled upon an old, forgotten path. Slivers of moonlight sliced through the trees, illuminating her path with a silvery glow. Hope ignited with each step, urging her on, but as she ran, shadows flitted across her vision. Were they watching? Waiting for their moment? Then, she heard it once more, Jake's voice, far off yet crystal clear. "Sarah, don't listen, run." Terror clutched her heart. She pressed forward, each step fueled by the resonance of his voice, the desperation within it. The clearing, the tree, the Joneses, they grew fainter behind her, the grip of despair loosening. But with a final lurch, the ground heaved again, the darkness clenching back, pulling at her legs. She cried out as the earth opened beneath her, a gaping void waiting to snatch her away. "Stay!" The chorus cried, laughter ringing out with a sinister intensity, now so close that it reverberated in her very bones. "Forever with us." And then she was falling, a powerless flail through pitch-black terror. All at once, the whispering darkness fell silent just as a familiar figure appeared above her. Sarah. It was Jake, silhouetted against a bright screen of light. But behind him, the void pulsated with hunger. Would she reach him? Or would the creeping darkness consume them both? As her scream cut through the silence, the falling stopped, and all that remained was an electrifying anticipation of the unknown. What would emerge from the dark? The world returned in a jolt, soundless and heavy. Sarah found herself suspended, hovering at the brink between light and that insatiable dark below. The glow around Jake shimmered like an illusion, flickering in and out as if to mock her desperation. "Sarah!" he shouted, reaching out with urgency, but the darkness stretched longingly towards her, ready to swallow her whole. "Grab my hand." She felt the tug of gravity, the cold fingers of the void grazing her ankles, biting like a chilling winter wind. Heart pounding, she lunged for him. Desperation enveloped her entire being, drowning her rational thoughts. "Jake, please!" she gasped, but she couldn't tell if her voice traveled through the silence. The ground beneath her loosened with a growl, spewing shadows that grasped around her, roiling like a living thing. "Hang on!" Jake cried, his silhouette brightening in response to her struggle. But his face contorted, and the light behind him flickered. Was it fading? Panic surged through her, a thrill of terror laced with disbelief. Shadows bunched closer, gnashing their teeth in a cacophony of laughter that echoed into her bones. "Leave him. You don't need them," they jeered. "You'll be one of us soon." Sarah's hand brushed Jake's. A spark shot through her, an electric jolt full of promise. But as her fingertips found purchase, the shadows hissed in fury, and the pull of the darkness became a ripping tide, tugging her the other way. "No!" Sarah screamed, pulling against the void with every ounce of strength she had. She could feel Jake's fingers in hers, warm and real, but the coldness from below consumed the warmth, urging her to let go. "Please, don't do this. We can make it out." Through the clamor, his voice broke like shattered glass. "We can't lose hope." "Hope?" The shadows mocked, echoing with a menacing chorus. "What has hope ever brought you?" In an instant, the ground beneath him trembled, and Jake's face twisted with concentration and fear, as if he could sense the battle raging within her. The glow around him shimmered, sputtering like a dying flame. "Sarah, hold on." Spurred by his determination, she felt strength surging through her legs. She had to fight back. She could not abandon him, not now. Together. She breathed, locking her eyes with his. The moment she made her choice, the shadows shrieked, a banshee wail that curled around her skull. They clawed and scraped, seeking to pull her back, promising her a fate woven with secrets and lies. "You belong to us," they cried, scrambling towards her. But she fought. Summoning everything, she yanked harder on his hand. The white light around them rippled like fabric stretched to its limits. "Sarah!" Jake yelled, his voice becoming a pure beam of light. "Let go of your doubts. Just trust." In a heartbeat, the shadows quaked, recoiling as if struck. She felt a rift of fire in her heart. It ignited the tether between them, a lifeline woven with her despair, wrapping around hope, swelling against the darkness. With one last surge, she threw herself toward him, and the void released its grip briefly. With a pop, an explosion of light erupted, casting shadows away like flies. Sarah stumbled forward, landing hard in a bed of soft grass, Jake tumbling beside her. They were sprawled in the moonlit clearing, backs against the cool earth. But now the air tasted different. There was an oppressive silence, void of laughter, yet the shadows lingered at the edges. Waiting, watching, grateful, she turned to Jake, who was panting, his eyes wide in disbelief. We did it!" she exclaimed, gasping for air. "Not yet," he murmured, scanning the perimeter. "We're not safe, they're still here." Suddenly, the ground trembled, the darkness swirling around the clearing, converging toward them. "You only delayed the inevitable," whispered that sickening familiar voice, full of malice. "What do we do?" Sarah whispered, fear knotting in her stomach as she felt the shadows creep closer, eager for another attempt at snatching them away. Jake gripped her hand tighter, his eyes reflecting the fear of 1,000 nightmares. "We have to uncover their secrets. Otherwise, it'll never end." But as they stared into the depths of the dark encroaching upon them, a chilling truth began to seep in. Some secrets were better left buried. What had they just awakened? And what darkness still lurked among these trees, desperate for a chance to reclaim what it had lost? The shadows pulsated like a heartbeat, their presence thick and suffocating. Sarah could feel the darkness kneading at her lungs, making it difficult to breathe. It clung to the trees, creeping forward like a predator lying in wait. "Jake," she murmured, barely able to keep the fear from coating her voice. "What did we just bring back?" "I don't know," he replied, staring into the void, "but we need to find out fast." The whispers grew louder, swirling around them, closer now. "You've disturbed us," they hissed. "You should have stayed away." Each syllable was like a thorn, digging deeper into her mind. The clearing began to lose its form, the soft grass folding, twisting as if the earth itself was conspiring against them. "It's not just shadows," Sarah thought, and a gut-churning realization settled in. This was more than just darkness, it was malice, intent, a dark symbiosis of forgotten souls. Suddenly, from the thick shadows, shapes began to form. Wispy figures materialized, their features obscured, but Sarah could feel their eyes boring into her, hungry and relentless. "Join us," they whispered. "It's safer here in the dark." "No!" Jake shouted, standing tall. His voice crackled over the noise, propelled by defiance. "We want to become what you are." The shadows recoiled, momentarily fading, exposing the silvery shimmer of moonlight. "Brave but foolish," they sneered, coiling back with lethal agility. A penetrating stillness fell. Not a single rustle disturbed the air, heightening the anticipation. With every breath, the night felt heavier, like an executioner waiting for a fateful decision. Where do we even start? Sarah's throat was dry, her heart was trembling against the walls of her chest. "Those trees," he pointed, where gnarled limbs twisted grotesquely upward. "Legends say the heart of the woods holds the truth. We have to reach it." A rumbling growl echoed, confirming the shadows were aware. "You think you'll escape? You'll never uncover the truth, it's buried in blood." Without more time to waste, they stumbled forward, hand in hand, legs quaking as the earth shifted beneath them. Barely keeping pace, they reached the tangle of roots. They stretched like claws seeking the surface, yearning to snatch them both back down. "Whatever's waiting, we go in together," Jake promised, his grip tightening on her fingers. The shadows seemed to pulse in anticipation of their next move, growing thicker and more pronounced, a wall that surrounded them completely. "Foolish children," they hissed now, darkness swirling like a tempest. "You can't know what you're about to awaken, what horrors will come." In the distance, Sarah spotted a faint glow flickering ahead, pulsing through the inky blackness. It danced almost like a heartbeat of its own, a beacon drawing her closer. Were they fools to follow its light? "Jake! Do you see that?" She shouted over the noise. He nodded, fear tangled with resolve in his eyes. "We're close. Don't lose sight of it." As they moved forward, every shadow seemed to coil tighter, whispering now not just words, but chilling pieces of their fate, echoing warnings of despair. "You're not ready, you'll wish you didn't." Come. They plunged deeper into the heart of the darkness, where the whispers swelled into a cacophony, louder and more chaotic. "What will we find there?" Sarah wondered, shivering as a cold breeze whipped through the trees. Then, with a sudden almost deafening crack, the ground split, and they were plunged into a gaping maw, blackness consuming them whole, falling into the unknown. They realized too late that some secrets were laid to rest for a reason. What fate waited below, hidden for centuries? And would they survive long enough to learn it? The sensation of falling transformed swiftly into a violent crash. They landed hard, pain exploding in Sarah's side as she gasped for air. The oppressive gloom that had swallowed them was now a suffocating cloud, and she realized they were not alone. The shadows, thicker than before, hovered menacingly at the edge of her vision, inching closer, creeping with an insatiable hunger. "Jake!" Her voice quivered, fear prickling her skin as if the darkness were slithering over her body. She scrambled to find him, her heart racing. The only response was silence, a silence so absolute it felt like a weight pressing down on her. "Jake!" Panic ignited inside her, bubbling relentlessly. She struggled to her feet, brushing dirt and grime from her clothes, her thoughts racing. Had they been separated in the fall? Perhaps the darkness had taken him. The very idea made her breath hitch. With trembling hands, she fumbled through the murkiness, calling out, "I'm here. I won't leave without you. Over here." A voice crackled weakly, echoing around her like a distant whisper. It was Jake. Relief flooded her, but it was swiftly followed by dread. His voice sounded strained, haunted. "Hold on." She shouted and stumbled toward the sound. Shadows curled at her feet, grasping, tugging at her ankles like fingers desperate to pull her back into the abyss. When she reached him, she found Jake leaning against a jagged wall of stone, the contours barely discernible amidst the gloom. His face was pallid, eyes wide and wild. "Did you hear them?" he breathed, shivering. "They're whispering something terrible like they know us." "What do you mean?" She stammered, her heart now hammering against her chest. I saw shapes," he said, glancing around nervously, "faces, Sarah. They're watching, waiting for something." The floor beneath them trembled, the whispers swirling faster. "You have arrived," they sang, a haunting melody rising and falling. "You are now one of us." "No." Jake shouted, pulling Sarah closer to him. "We have to find a way out before they take us. Over here." Sarah spotted a flicker of light again, stronger this time, beckoning from a dark passageway to their right. "That way." Without waiting for a response, she rushed toward the glow, pulling Jake behind her. The shadows shrieked, an anguished sound that reverberated through the air, sending a wave of terror crashing over them. "Don't stop," Jake urged, the grip on her hand tightening. Pain surged through her as the shadows clawed at her, thin wisps probing for an opening into her mind, whispering promises that lured her with sweet temptation. "Sarah, focus. Don't listen," he yelled, sweat trickling down his brow. "They want to steal you away." That struck a chord. The darkness couldn't have her. Not now. She pushed forward, the light illuminating the way like a promise of deliverance. They burst through the narrow passage and into a larger chamber. What they found there made Sarah freeze. The walls were lined with bones, human remains twisted into grotesque shapes, their hollow eyes staring wide in eternal terror. "No, no," she whispered, the horror sinking its claws into her heart. This was more than just a dark space, it was a tomb, a ritualistic chamber where dark deeds had unfolded. "Look," Jake pointed, his voice hollow, "there's a pedestal. It looks like it's meant for something, someone." As they approached the pedestal, a chilling realization washed over them. Imprinted on its surface were marking symbols that pulsed softly, each beat resonating with the whispers that had tortured them from the start. "Don't touch it," Sarah warned, stepping back, her pulse racing. "It's a trap. We have to destroy it." But before she could react, the shadows surged. They twisted, violently rushing toward the pedestal as if drawn by an unseen force, their whispers merging into a chaotic shriek. "You've awakened us, you've made it worse." The ground shook violently beneath them, and a low growl emanated from the depths of the chamber. "You'll never leave, you are part of us now." With one last desperate push, they raced toward the light, the pulsating symbols casting dark illusions around them. But was it an escape or merely the beginning of their end? As the darkness battled for dominance, Sarah felt the line between fear and acceptance slowly blur. Was there any hope left, or had they stepped deeper into a nightmare they could never awaken from? What would claim them next, flesh or fate? The shadows recoiled like a living creature, but they did not fade. Instead, they pulsed with a new energy. An unseen force drew closer, cocooning the room in a deepening darkness, thickening the air until it felt impossibly heavy. Sarah and Jake stumbled back, bracing themselves against the pedestal, eyes wide with terror. "Run!" Jake shouted, the urgency of his voice slicing through the whispers. They sprinted to the back of the chamber, where the light flickered uncertainly, beckoning them like a cruel mirage. The walls, slick with a cold mist, seemed to close in around them as they retreated, an altar to something far more ancient than they could comprehend. The shadows swirled, drawing upon the remnants of the bones surrounding them. Sarah could almost feel them shifting, moving, restless. As they reached the edge of the glowing light, she could see faces in the walls, faces she recognized from her nightmares. Friends. Family. All trapped in an eternal gaze, eyes wide with a fear that mirrored her own. "Sarah." Jake gripped her shoulder. His face was as pale as the bones surrounding them, his breath harsh and ragged. "We can't just stand here." There was nowhere to go. The flickering light seemed to pulse in rhythm with the shadows, like a heartbeat echoing in sync with the chaos around them. Down the passage they had come from, a figure emerged from the darkness. It stepped into the light, revealing a woman, her expression twisted in pain. Blood trickled from her lips, her eyes a hollow void, empty and seething. "Join us," she rasped, her voice like dried leaves crunching in the wind. "You cannot fight it. You belong here. Don't listen." Sarah screamed, clutching Jake's arm tightly. But Jake just stood there, frozen in place. Something in the air changed. The whispers became a symphony, an intoxicating lullaby that tugged at the corners of his mind. He swayed slightly, as if surrendering to the ghostly grasp. "Jake!" Sarah shook him, desperation clawing at her throat. "We need to go." With a sudden force, he snapped back to her, his eyes wide with realization. "We can't let them take us. If we give in they'll win." The woman in the shadows recoiled, her face distorting with rage. The shadows shrieked. The sound burrowed into Sarah's ears, a cacophony of voices begging and pleading, their echoes growing louder and more demanding. "Choose," they wailed. "Join us or be forever lost." Suddenly, the ground shook with more urgency. Gravel and bones shifted beneath their feet as a rumble filled the chamber. The pedestal began to glow brighter, casting an eerie light across the walls, an invitation and a warning. "What do we do?" Jake yelled, fighting to keep his voice steady against the raging tempest of noise. "You have to trust me." Sarah pulled him toward the wall, nearly slipping on the slick surface. "We can break through." "Break through what?" He panicked. The pedestal surged light, lashing out like a whip, illuminating the room. Shadows recoiled but quickly regrouped, twisting around the walls with renewed fury. "Sarah. If we go back, it'll just push us into them." Jake's heart raced as he scanned their options. In that moment of chaos, Sarah spotted something, a crack in the wall, jagged and irregular, just big enough for them to squeeze through. "We have to try. Right now. On 3. Jake shouted. 1. 2. A voice, cold as ice, hissed from the shadows, "There is no escape. You belong to us. Forever. Now." Sarah screamed, lunging towards the crack, pulling Jake after her. But as they dove into the narrow opening, the shadows surged behind them, clawing for their ankles, hungry for their souls. Did those skeletal grips have the power to pull them back to oblivion? They tumbled into the unknown, hope and terror entwined, as the light behind them was snuffed out. Were they free, or had they merely traded one prison for another? A low, malicious laugh seeped into the darkness, echoing around them as they fell. It stirred something deep within the shadows, a promise: you are never alone. What fate awaited them in the blackness that surrounded? The void swallowed them, an endless chasm lined with shadows, and then a sudden burst of light pulled them from the darkness. Sarah gasped as they collapsed onto damp earth, blinking against a brightness that felt like a lifeline. Around them, the forest resembled a fever dream, its trees aglow with a warm shine that surrounded them like a protective cocoon. "Are we out?" Jake's voice emerged hoarsely, a tremor of hope threading through his words. Sarah scanned their surroundings, still shaking from fear. "I think so," she breathed, heart thumping in her chest. They were in a clearing, sunlight filtering through the leaves above, warming her skin, a stark contrast to the chilling touch that lingered in her memory. But the moment of relief was short-lived. A low growl shook the air, piercing through the tranquil facade. Shadows slithered at the edges, creeping closer, and Sarah felt their familiar chill wrap around her once more. Panic gripped her throat. "We have to move," she yelled, pulling Jake to his feet. They turned to run, but the forest seemed alive, roots and vines reaching out as if intent on snatching them back. "Sarah, wait!" Jake shouted, his voice now panicked. "There are symbols on the trees." The surrounding trunks bore strange markings, glowing faintly, each pole synchronizing with the whispers from the shadows. "They're trying to communicate." Sarah grabbed Jake's hand tighter. "What do they want?" Maybe he hesitated, glancing at the symbols, which seemed to dance with a life of their own. "They want to warn us." Without thinking, Sarah kneeled, tracing her fingers over one of the symbols. A sharp pang surged through her, visions blurring the line between memory and reality. She saw flickers of the other children, faces lost to time, stuck in the dark as the shadows loomed. The whispers grew louder, insistent now. "Join us, you belong to us." "No." Sarah gasped, shaking her head violently as if she could shatter the visions. "We have to protect ourselves. We have to stop this." But the shadows surged forward, forming grotesque figures that wore the faces of lost children, mouths stretched wide in eternal screams. "You'll never leave." They wailed. They had to push through the growing dread, the weight of despair threatening to crush them. "Jake, believe in what we saw," Sarah shouted, determination igniting within her. "These children became part of the darkness, but now we can turn this monster back." Jake searched her eyes, fear mingled with the flicker of hope. "You're right. We can't let them win." He lifted his chin defiantly. "Together, on 3. Okay." She answered, adrenaline coursing through her. 1. The shadows curled closer, screeches echoing through the clearing. 2. The markings on the trees began to flicker, pulsating wildly, fanning the fire of their courage. 3. They bolted forward, charging with every ounce of willpower they possessed. A blinding light enveloped them as they barreled into the center of the clearing, where the sunlight broke through the canopy. For a brief moment, the shadowy figures faltered, their twisted forms wavering against the brightness. "Now! Think of them!" Sarah cried, remembering each pleading face she glimpsed, the voices that called out for help in the dark. For the first time, she felt the shadows recoil, shrinking back under the weight of her defiance. Those figures were not just remnants of despair. They were souls trapped within the malevolence, and together, they too could push back. "One more time!" Jake shouted, raising his arm high. The shadows twisted like smoke, hissing and swirling, but they resisted with a clarity that pulsed through Sarah's veins. "No more games!" She screamed, and, channeling her will, the duo unleashed a wave of energy toward the forest. The ground shook with the collision of light and darkness, a brilliance bursting forth as the symbols flared. "What is happening?" Jake cried, as the darkness writhed and contorted, pushing against their brilliance in desperation. "Hold on!" she shouted, bracing herself as the light surged, illuminating the woods in crisp clarity. The figures dissolved into radiant streams that swirled into the air, their tormented forms released into the ether, finally free from the shadows. With one final push, the darkness erupted, shattering like glass. It exploded outward, and Sarah and Jake staggered back, falling onto the grass as the gloom dissipated, leaving behind sunlight that warmed their skin. Breathless, they lay side by side, the whispering chorus of suffering extinguished at last. "Are we safe?" Jake murmured, lifting his head to gaze at the now serene forest. "Maybe," she replied, the warmth of hope wrapping around her. "But we should get home. We have to tell everyone everything." As they rose, a gentle breeze rustled the trees, and sunlight filtered through the leaves like a peaceful promise. They walked hand in hand, knowing the shadows might linger, but they held the strength to face anything that dared challenge their resolve. The fear would never fully leave them, but together they would forge a new beginning, a life unbroken by the darkness that once threatened to consume them. No longer bound by the past, they took their first steps toward home, where safety awaited. Thank you for joining Sarah and Jake on this chilling journey. You need to subscribe now to stay on the edge of your seat for our next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now, don't just stand there. Feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this crazy ending. What do you think will happen to Sarah and Jake next? And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support means everything. Be part of our family and join us for the next thrilling adventure.